Hi there, my name is Jeff Hudson from the QUADCA team, and today we're going to go through the basics of a proper furnace and air duct cleaning on a residential house. We're also going to show you some of the agitation tools and proper equipment that's used in a duct cleaning. And let's go. Okay, well, an important part of the furnace and duct cleaning process is when you come into any job, you should always test all the components of the furnace. Including the air conditioning, the humidifier, UV lights, or whatever is hooked up into the system. That way you know that everything's working properly before you start doing anything. And you can note if there is something wrong, you can always notify the customer of that at that time before you start the job. Okay, so now that we've tested the furnace and all of its components and we've made sure everything's working properly, the next thing you want to do is come down to the furnace room. You're going to want to inspect the furnace, just see if anything's out of order. Next thing you want to do is you want to turn off the power to the furnace. So we'll want to switch that off. And usually there is a power switch dedicated to the furnace that you can find. It'll be labeled, or you can just tell from following an electrical wire from the furnace. But if you can't find that, then you're going to need to turn off the power from the breaker panel. After that, you're also going to want to inspect the ductwork just to see where everything's running, so you kind of have an idea of what you're getting into before you start. The other thing to consider is you really want to look for any hot air vents that are directly on the bottom of these main ducts, or cold air return vents that are right on the bottom of the ducts, because when you're cleaning the system from upstairs, you're going to have debris flying all over the place in the basement. So you want to keep some painter's tape handy to seal up those vents, so you're not going to cause a mess in the basement. Okay, so today the furnace we are going to be working on is a Lennox high efficiency furnace. It also has air conditioning installed, so there is an AC coil present. So what we're going to do next is we're going to remove the blower and we're going to prep the furnace and ductwork to be cleaned. Okay, so the first step is we're going to remove the doors off the furnace. These just pop off and set them aside somewhere. Okay, so I'll just go through some of the components of this furnace. Up here you have your burners, and inside this compartment you'll find your flame rod, safety sensors that allow the burners to kick on and off. Usually you don't have to touch this component very much when you're furnace cleaning. Usually it'd have to be a heating air conditioning company to adjust anything in there. So usually you're just lightly blowing off this section. This is the gas valve. Basically just turns the gas on and off. Down here is what we call an inducer motor, and sometimes these will start making noise. If they're making noise before you start doing the furnace and duct cleaning, always make sure that you let the owners of the house know that it's starting to act up. The only thing that will get rid of the noise if it is making noise is to replace the whole part on almost all furnaces. So you should always take a listen too when you're running the furnace. After you turn the furnace on, you're going to want to come downstairs and listen to the furnace, and if you hear any rattling, any noise that is just out of the ordinary, you're definitely going to want to let the customer know. And if you don't have your gas ticket or you don't own a heating air conditioning company, you want to be able to refer someone to do that type of work if you can't do it yourself. Okay, so now we're ready to remove this blower out of this Lennox furnace. Just as a side note, a blower should always be pulled out of any furnace if at all possible. I know there will be times where it's pretty much impossible to get the blower out of the bottom, but you should always remove it. It's an important part of complete furnace and duct cleaning. On this particular model, we're a little bit lucky because all the wiring is come down one side of the furnace. To get this board out, it's not going to be too much of a problem. Now, if there was wiring coming from the thermostat or anywhere else from the humidifier, anything, you'd have to remove those wires because you're going to end up having to pull this board out to the right. So any wiring that came from this way would have to be taken off. Anytime you have to remove wires from any board, You should always have a pad of paper and a pen handy so that you can just write down their assigned positions on the board. Or even take a picture. If you have a cell phone camera, you can take a picture if you can get a good enough view of it, just so that there's going to be no mistakes in putting wiring back in its assigned spots. Now with this particular model as well, we're just going to remove these fan wires. This is the wiring for the actual motor inside the fan. In this one, it's just got a little plastic clip here that's basically holding them to the other wires from the furnace itself. And we're just going to clip that off, and just make sure when you're clipping this off that you're not, you know, cutting any wires or anything. You're just going to want to make sure you're getting plastic. Just clip it off. That way all these wires are loose. And then basically you're going to want to see where all these are hooked up. So for example, on this board, we got the white wire going into neutral. So you're just going to write that onto your sheet. You got the brown wire hooked up to the cool post. So I just use an abbreviation like BR. The yellow is going into the heat. And then down here, you have the black wire going into park. And right underneath that, the red wire going into park. And now that you know, you have it written down on your little sheet where everything goes, then it's as simple as just removing them from their posts. Sometimes it takes a little tug. It's handy to have some needle nose pliers. Anyway, you got to be careful that you're not yanking too hard. You're not going to damage anything. But just remove them right off the board. And just set them aside here. The fan is completely off of this board, of the control board. Now the other thing I do all the time is before I remove this completely out of the furnace, I'm going to make sure that everything's nice and secure. All the wires that I'm leaving in the board, I want to make sure everything's nice and secure in there. So I want to just give these a little, make sure everything's in tight. You want to tighten down these thermostat wiring screws so that when you're removing it, nothing's going to pop out on you. And that's that. Now we're ready to remove the board. Okay, so the only thing holding in this control board is just two little screws that are just up underneath here. So to get this off, all you need to do is really remove those screws. These ones you actually don't even have to remove all the way out because they have a little slot that they fit into. So you just have to loosen this off. Then it's handy to have an assortment of bungee cords around, so that you can kind of adjust them to where you want. And as simple as removing this, putting it to the side. This blower is just held in by two 5/16 screws or bolts, and basically it's on they're along the top of its frame. So they're pretty easy to find. They're right at the front, and it's just as easy as just taking those out with your nut driver or your ratchet or whatever you want to use. Okay, and now it just slides out. And you'll want to make sure that the board's as out of the way as possible. There we go, it's out. And then you're just going to want to put it out of the way for now, because that's one of the last things that you clean. So usually you just find it, you know, beside the furnace somewhere where you're not going to trip and fall over it.